Hello everyone, welcome back again. First of all, I would like to thank you all for your positive response on my previous video on choosing software testing as a career option. As many of you requested, I decided to dedicate some time aside to share my knowledge in the area of software testing. So to start with, I thought that I should definitely start with the test case. So although a test case looks like a tiny component in the world of software testing, in fact it is actually one of the integral part of testing that decides the fate of testing. So let us start our learning with test case and how you can write a very good test case and accomplish excellent quality for your software applications. So first and foremost, functionality. So by default, the basic necessity is that your test cases covers the functionality, what is designed for that feature or requirement. A simple example, if you're creating users in your application, then obviously your test cases should have different scenarios of creating users. Apart from the functionality, there are certain other elements which you need to consider when you write the test cases. So why I'm stressing more on the other factors is that by experience, I notice that most of us will definitely cover the functionality in our test cases because that comes to us by nature. It is like a very common thing for us to do in our testing software life cycle. The other factors that I would like to highlight for your test cases, one is test data. Now, when you test, it is very important that you test the scenarios using different kinds of test data. So you may have different fields involved in the feature. You may be uploading files of different nature. Now you need to make sure that you have covered all the possible test data. When I say in terms of test data, it should cover all the data types, numeric, strings, special characters. When it comes to files, you'll have to cover all the different file types, what is supported by your feature. So this is very important to make sure that your application does not break when any user enters a data which is not acceptable by the system. So in most of the cases, developers do handle validations such that they don't allow the users to enter a kind of data that is not accepted. However, there are chances that some kind of validations are missed and a bad data can cause crashes in your application. The next factor is quantity. So when I say quantity, most of you may be thinking that I may be speaking of load, but right now what I wanted to emphasize is not the actual load on your system. I'm not talking in volumes of like thousands or millions of records being tested. When I'm talking in terms of quantity, for example, let us take the previous example of creating a user or you're creating some entity in your application. You may test by creating say 5 or 10, right? But sometimes it so happens that when you have 50 or 100 of those, there are some problems in the application. The search might not work, the filters may not work, you don't know. And for you might think that by testing by a small number of cases, it should discover the bugs. But sometimes I have seen cases that a quantity as less as 100 or 200 also causes issues in the application. Specifically, if there are paginations and there are filters, there are search options in the application, do emphasize that you are taking care of quantity as well. The next factor is integration with other features. So Obviously, in an application, there are features which are interlinked. A very simple example would be, say, users and roles, right? So when you create a user and you give certain privileges to him, you're connecting roles with features. So any feature or any requirement for which you're writing test cases, it is important for you to think, hey, is this feature connected to something else? How does this feature work in integration with that? If I mix up those features in a workflow, how does that work? How does that workflow work? Does it work well? Does it break when I try to integrate somewhere else? So this normally happens. So during testing, we so get involved with respect to a particular feature. Sometimes we tend to forget that, oh, this feature might have something to do with some other feature, and they're actually linked. And that is the reason couple of times we see that, okay, on a day-to-day testing, your application might work, you don't find much bugs, but in a real life situation, when the customers start using the application, you find a lot of workflows breaking. And that is because in a real life scenario, there are a lot of integration workflows which gets tested. So in order to avoid such situations, please make sure that when you write test cases, you are also testing the integration of that feature with other features. The next factor is security. Now, security is given a lot of importance in today's world. In all the applications, we have seen security violations in different day-to-day applications that we use today. And so as a tester, now yes, we do have different categories of testing. We say security has to be taken care by security testing, performance has to be done through load testing. However, I agree that there is certain amount of security has to be checked while you write test cases. A very simple example could be that, there's an email exchange between users in the application, and there are certain emails, say with a link for resetting the password, which should be hidden, although the emails are visible to different users. So certain cases where you can spot that, okay, this can be avoided, this could be a security violation, please keep a tab on that. And by informing that much earlier during the software testing life cycle, you're adding a lot of value to your application. Usability, this has to be identified by the tester at the test case level. So when you write test cases, please think for a moment, look back and think if you've had to struggle a lot to find how this feature works, or as a common man, would it be very difficult for the user to really understand this feature? Would it be very difficult for him to understand how the navigation works in this feature? If yes, then definitely we have a usability issue with this feature. Sometimes we tend to think that no, we couldn't find it doesn't mean that there's a usability issue. Sometimes we tend to think that it's our problem that we couldn't find the flow very quickly. But I would request you to set aside those thoughts and think that if you happen to have some complexity in understanding the feature, in finding the flow for the feature, although you know something about the application, then a newbie who doesn't know anything about the application would definitely have problems in understanding them. So it's very important that you emphasize on the usability of the particular feature when you write test case. The next factor is compatibility. Now, compatibility, when I say compatibility, here I'm referring to the compatibility of your application in terms of handling different browsers, compatibility when it comes in handling mobile devices. So if so happens that your application is compatible in different platforms, make sure that when you write test cases and test it, you're also covering the different platforms and devices supported by your application. So those are the factors which I wanted to share with you today in terms of a test case. I'm hoping that this video is useful, and please leave your feedback as before in the comment section. Thank you.